Hello, Cure fans, near and far. Welcome to the Holy Hour. This is Gavin. This is the podcast devoted to the Cure. We talk about the Cure a lot in these parts. So thanks for downloading, streaming, or joining us in whatever fashion you listen to your podcast in. If you're not familiar with us, we usually we talk about anything Cure related. We talk to our friends about the Cure. Our friends talk to their friends about the Cure. I always talk about full albums sometimes. We talk about moods, the live shows, and occasionally we've been talking about songs, specific songs. I thought we'd change up this episode a little bit and not only focus on one of the Cure's most widely known and popular songs, Inbetween Days, but also its B-side. So the whole 12-inch single is pretty rare that it would have such amazing B-sides on it. And we're going to look at the whole package today. It's just, it strikes me still as baffling that this single could have such amazing B-sides. The 12-inch, the singles come out in a lot of variations. Most widely, just as the 45 would have Inbetween Days and the B-side being Exploding Boy. You get the 12-inch, you get the extra song on the backside. So kind of like a CD single before the CD was around, really. So this just struck me as amazing that I think I'll go on record saying the best single ever put out as far as a whole package. I'm sure the Beatles have some good B-sides too, and the Smiths are known for amazing B-sides. I won't argue that, but I think this one just has the 1, 2, 3 punch that makes it the best single ever. The cover's amazing. It's from an amazing album. And it's timeless, It was put out in July 15th, 1985. I mean, the fact that it's, 32 years old at this point? And will still get you every time. And the single, leading it off, Inbetween Days. I got so much to say about all three of these songs, but we had some great contributions from listeners for this episode. So a lot of what I want to say gets covered by them. So I'm kind of going to let them do most of the talking. I'll read some of the write-ins, and then Arusha is back with two of her buddies from up in New York, and they discuss these three songs in particular and cover a lot of ground. So I'll kind of chime in before and after and give my 2 cents, but I'm gonna let the listeners, you guys out there, do all the talking in this episode. So I think it's just a great song to kick it off, though. Inbetween Days is pretty much in the caliber of Just Like Heaven and all the big powerhouse songs that the Cure have from about 85 up. They always have their back ones that people love. Of course, Boys Don't Cry and all fall into these. There's singles off of all of it that are hard to argue, but this is around when the Cure not only are writing amazing pop songs that are breaking through to wider audiences, but still sticking true to, the weirder side of alternative music, I guess. It's such a catchy song that you play this for anyone. It's so hard. I don't know anybody, even Donald, our friend Donald, that can find a fault in anything. I don't even think he could argue this song. It's just an amazing song. The only thing you could argue is maybe you get a little sick of it, but even that, when you hear it, you still can't get sick of this song. How many times have we all heard Inbetween Days, and you never get sick of it? It just comes on the radio or somewhere unexpected. It still gives you little chills. And I think it's safe to say that Inbetween Days in particular is probably considered the gateway drug for Cure fans, a lot of us anyway. I would say that a huge percentage of Cure fans probably either heard for the first time Inbetween Days and fell in love with it, or kind of like myself, where you had your whatever reasons of hearing songs and got Standing on the Beach or something along those lines of a greatest hits or a singles compilation, and Inbetween Days was the one that hooked you, though. I remember definitely digging every song leading up to Inbetween Days on Standing on the Beach because it's near the end there. And but yeah, I definitely remember moments of hearing that song and just being like, oh, this is so good, and playing it constantly on loop. And To a certain degree, it's never stopped. And our first segment comes from Tyler. You'll remember Tyler from episode 14, one of the first people to contribute to this show. And we're so glad to hear back from him. And turns out Inbetween Days was the starting point for him. So let's hear what he has to say about that wonderful tune and its wonderful B-side.
So I wanted to talk a little bit about Inbetween Days and just kind of what it means to me as far as being a fan of The Cure. Inbetween Days was actually the song that made me a fan of them. I had first heard, of course, songs like Just Like Heaven and Boys Don't Cry and Friday I'm in Love on the radio, and I casually knew that they were a band that existed that had released a number of albums. And so circa 2007, early 2007, I was just getting into the band Korn, and they did an MTV Unplugged album for whatever reason. If there's one band that should not be should not be unplugged, it's Korn. But as I was listening to the CD the first time, as it went along, I was kind of realizing, this isn't really working, but I was giving it a try, and towards the end of it, one of the songs that they have a song called Make Me Bad, and they ended up bringing out Robert Smith and the rest of The Cure, and they do this kind of mashup of Make Me Bad and Inbetween Days. And I remember hearing it, and almost as soon as Robert started singing, I kind of knew, like, all right, I've got to stop listening to Korn. I'm going to have to start listening to these guys over here, because this is what, to me, is great. And I remember kind of like the triptych of songs that got me interested in them was Inbetween Days, 100 Years, and Fascination Street. And the first two albums of theirs that I ever heard in full was Pornography, of course, which opens with 100 Days, and then The Head on the Door, which of course opens with Inbetween Days. Pornography opens with 100 Years, my mistake. And I mean, you cannot have two more different Cure albums to listen to first. But Inbetween Days, as an actual song, like as the song itself, it really helps to usher in a whole new sound of The Cure, as well as a whole new lineup. This is kind of going to be the quote-unquote classic lineup of the band, for The Head on the Door, Kiss Me, Kiss Me, and then Lol was replaced by Roger O'Donnell for Disintegration, but the core of the band, which is Robert Smith, Boris Williams, Simon Gallup, and Paul Thompson, it stays constant up through 1992. And Inbetween Days really is the first taste of that before the actual release of the Head on the Door album, and the song really serves as a perfect example of how an opening track on an album can fully encapsulate what that album is going to sound like. On the Head on the Head on the Door, you get these elements. You get a lot of acoustic guitar. On songs like The Blood, you have these very upbeat songs with these very dark lyrics. Songs like, Push, A Night Like This. I mean, even a song like Screw, which is a little bit more zany, but Inbetween Days really does help to fully prepare the listener for the album that they're about to listen to. The song itself, I mean, I would definitely still put it in my top 3 Cure songs, probably right after the song Disintegration and A Forest from 17 Seconds. And it was a treat finally being able to see them last year, and actually seeing them finally playing the song. The one time I had seen them before, they hadn't played it. It was for their Reflections tour, so Inbetween Days was absent from the set list. And so actually finally being able to see them live was it was about 8 or 9 years coming. As for the actual B-sides, the B-sides on Inbetween Days, on the various Inbetween Days singles, are mostly pretty good. Yeah, you have The Exploding Boy, a few hours after this, and I had heard all of these for the first time on the actual bonus disc of The Head on the Door in their demo stages, so I was more familiar with those before I actually heard the finished versions. Of course, The Exploding Boy is, in my opinion, one of the best Cure B-sides. I would probably put it up there with something like Too Late, Fear of Ghosts, Descent, New Day. All of those and The Exploding Boy are probably, I would say, the best Cure B-sides. It's kind of a shame that The Exploding Boy is not featured on The Head on the Door. I feel like they could have easily replaced a song like 6 Different Ways with The Exploding Boy, and the album might actually be enhanced because of it. That's just my opinion. But the Exploding Boy, it's such a fun B-side, and it could have been a very great pop A-side for the band, I feel. A few hours after this, I actually prefer the original demo version that's found on the second disc of the Head on the Door reissue. I feel like they're trying to reach a little bit too high with the finished version that appears on the B-side of Inbetween Days. It's a little too almost kind of wannabe anthemic, I feel. I prefer the stripped down version of the demo, and I prefer the lyrics of the demo actually. It has more of kind of a bouncy fun feel to it, which I think that's what I'm looking for. I just think that it goes better with the other songs from The Head on the Door and the other B-sides, the demo version, I would say. It actually kind of almost reminds me of some of the B-sides that they would do for Kiss Me, Kiss Me, Kiss Me, songs like Breathe or To the Sky. One of the many nice things about The Head on the Door is that the cover artwork does kind of perfectly encapsulate what the album is going to be like, at least for me when I listen to it and I kind of envision the band playing it, the colors of blue and that bright kind of yellow splash. And then, of course, the dominant black really does play into my mental image of the band. And then, who knows, maybe they do have their faces painted like they do on the cover of the Inbetween Days single, who knows. So yeah, that's my thoughts on Inbetween Days, both as a song and as a single, and the various B-sides. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much, Tyler. So good to hear from you again, and so many good points and interesting perspective on that one. So thanks for sharing with us. And I think that's our first official vote for Exploding Boy being on the album. So it's going to come up again, trust me. And just to rear it back to Inbetween Days as a song, why this song, I wonder, that makes it so good when it's a fairly simple structured song. But that opening drum roll, the acoustic guitars, it's the first time we were really hearing acoustic guitars like that in a Cure song. Just the rambly, awesome rhythm. I don't know if we've really heard any acoustic guitars much from the Cure leading up to this. The top definitely in a more worldly fashion, but now that I think about it, there's pretty much no acoustic guitars leading up to, definitely just to fill out mixes on songs, but where it's featured that prominently. So yeah, maybe that's what makes it stand out so much too. It's just that awesome guitar with the signature Simon bass line is back, and it's definitely one of a few of the can't go without saying the crossover of New Orderness. If you do listen to Dreams Never End off of Movement, it is pretty reminiscent. Not entirely, though. Just like you could hum parts of Inbetween Days over that song. I don't really remember New Order's official argument of what But they are pretty similar, and New Orders came way first on this one. So, but the bottom line of that, there's people that say they just don't hear any similarity. And, I hear it for sure. And Robert's gone on the record of being a fan of Movement. But I don't know. Inbetween Days is just so much of a better song, and I love New Order. So, I don't know. I can't figure. It's one of those deals where if you take a part of a song, whether you're ripping it off or inspired by it, whatever you want to call it, and you just make a song that's like 5,000 times better, then it's kind of hard to argue, right? So, I don't know. That's where I stand on that one. But I'm going to hand it off now to Chaz, one of our longtime buddies now at this point here on the Holy Hour. I'm going to read an email that he wrote because he covered so many of the points that I wanted to make. I started to jot down some notes, and he really kind of hit it on the head there. So I'll kind of just read what he has to say and probably throw in my 2 cents at the end here. So let's see what Chaz has to say about Inbetween Days, Exploding Boy, and a few hours after this. Hey, Gavin. As the first song of Head on the Door, Inbetween Days completely changed the direction of the band, and I have no doubt that it was done on purpose. You could definitely hear some of that transformation on Japanese Whispers, but it seemed to go completely off the rails on the top. Now I know there's some people out there, for some reason or another, that love the top, but for me, it's one of the worst albums, and after reading Lowell's book, and after stories about the band at the time, it's easy to see why it was such a mess. Robert put the brakes on the band and hit the reset button, and Inbetween Days signified the reset. As the movie Sing Street labeled it as happy sad, it would be the perfect label for The Cure, compared to their previous work, which many would just label as sad or goth or whatever. The song itself is brilliant. It set the mold for the hits to come. It's simple and poppy. It was just like heaven before Just Like Heaven. The songs are so similar in their format that it's amazing how they got away with 2 huge hits that could be confused for the other, at least from the very beginning. From the opening drums, which are right in your face, to the use of acoustic guitar, to the keyboards coming in and taking the whole thing over for a few brief seconds, it's all so fucking brilliant and different from anything they had previously had done. I am just amazed at Robert's ability to make a pop song, and like any true great artist, have huge crossover appeal where you can have people from very different musical worlds fall in love with it. Just look at all the different type of artists that have covered it. Not just this song, but a long list of Cure songs. Inbetween Days is a weird and drastic shift from the songs like The Walk, Let's Go to Bed, and even songs on Head on the Door like Baby Screams and Screw that sound like they could have fit better on the top. It's almost like Robert had this song and Close to Me up his sleeve, and he was just waiting to pull them out and say to the rest of the band, we're going to build our next album, our next tour, and the future on these 2 songs. Just fucking watch. I could go on and on about how smart Head on the Door is, but we'll save that for another episode. That would bring me to the B-sides of Inbetween Days. I just don't understand how the Exploding Boy gets left off the album. That song is great and definitely one of their best B-sides. Head on the Door is such a short album that I don't understand holding the Exploding Boy off of the album. I will have to admit, the first time I heard it, I was like, what the fuck? And then I let the song play out, and it's such a solid song. I'm writing a screenplay right now, and every time I think about the final scene, I can't help but thinking about this song playing as the credits roll. I know it's a crazy dream, but a boy can dream. I like A Few Hours After This too, and I'm fine with that being a B-side, but I definitely prefer the original version to whatever they did with it for the one they used on Luther. That song just doesn't hit me the same as Exploding Boy. Maybe it's Robert trying to sing over the drums and the synthesizers, but I love the lyrics to it. Anyway, that's all I got. Sorry it's a little all over the place. I wrote it in bits and pieces between sleep and kids. Chaz. Well, Chaz, thank you so much. You hit it right on the head for a lot of your points there, and I hope you got some good sleep and the kids are all doing well. I have to admit, I'm right there with you. I think it's very safe to say that this is a definitive milestone for the band. It's just the style of that kind of pop song that would really break the Cure through. I think it definitely plowed the way for Just Like Heaven and even Pictures of You on a more dramatic, drawn-out approach. Even Love Song to a certain degree, but just having the right combo of weird and catchy that wide audiences could really get behind, all the way up through like Mint Car and such. You could probably argue that Boys Don't Cry had that, but the way it was recorded originally, and because they were so young, it didn't really translate. But I feel like even, yeah, I mean, when they re-recorded the vocals for, the single that came out with Standing on the Beach, it definitely had more of that In-Between Days feel to it. So it was in there, but it just had to get channeled, and I think this really kicked it all off. And yeah, as far as a few hours after this, if you didn't quite catch what he was referring to there with the Luther version, there's a TV show, a British cop show called Luther. You should check out. It's a good show, by the way. But apparently the director was a fan of A Few Hours After This and asked if they could use it for an episode. And Robert, maybe being a fan enough or just flattered enough with the idea, was like, definitely, and I'll record you a new version. So there's a clip floating around out there of a newer, within the last couple of years, or last year even, of A Few Hours After This, done a little more modern style. And it sounds a little bit like a Robert solo B-side kind of thing with a cool drum loop, and it's slowed down, but cool, because I love the song so much, but yeah, compared to the original version, it's not as good, to be honest. And yeah, it's weird. There's no way to find that clip. So if anybody out there listening knows of a place where you can download the entire song, let us know for sure, because I can't find like an actual recording of it. There's a YouTube clip, I think, taken just from how they used it in the actual show, floating around on YouTube. We'll link to that in the Facebook page so you can hear it if you haven't yet. But I don't know if the fans are really ever going to get an official version of that. So we'll keep our eyes and ears peeled. Thanks so much, Chaz. Hope all is well. Always good to hear from you. We got an email as well from Juliana that I'd like to read you now. Juliana says, can't necessarily say that In-Between Days is one of my all-time favorites, but it stirs up one of my earliest Cure memories. I had a friend in high school who had the best hangout basement complete with the latest stereo system. This was around 1991. He was a huge Cure fan, and with his brother, they totally recreated the video, complete with face paint and everything. Whenever I hear the song, I always think so fondly of those times. Also, my husband's intro to The Cure and this song was interestingly from a cover version of the band Face to Face on a compilation called Punk Goes New Wave, probably from the mid-90s. Anyway, he's been a Cure fan ever since. Thanks for your podcast, Jules and Ben. Thank you, Jules and Ben. And yeah, a couple good points there. The video. This was a huge video for The Cure. Not only in the peak MTV prime video time to make a good video, but Tim Pope really hit in on the head with this one, because it was a fun one, but it was subtle still. And even with all the imagery that you associate with In-Between Days and the day-glow faces and everything, they didn't really overdo it. There's not really much use of that in the actual video if you watch it. Just a few little shots at the end and some weird kind of swirly stuff going on, but they really didn't, overdo it by being the whole video was them with the glowing faces. And it's just kind of, the colors are great. You can tell they're fun, but it doesn't take away in a goofy way or anything. Anybody that's dug into the whole notes of that with added the glowing socks is a funny little touch that's perfect Tim Pope stories. We're going to have to do a whole Tim Pope episode soon, I think. That would be a good one. And but yeah, the whole point being, I guess they made fun of his socks, so it was a joke. He put in the one little scene with the socks attack Robert Smith in there and kick him in the butt when he falls down and such. But yeah, just the fact that it's fun but not overly goofy, even though that just totally made it sound goofier than it is. Anyway, if you haven't seen the video for whatever the hell reason, check it out. Really cool. And I think that did a lot to push them into the wider audiences again, not only with a song that's more accessible, but just a really cool video that wasn't too weird or anything too. So yeah. And as far as the cover version, yeah, like we said, a lot of people have covered this song. Luca Bloom, Ben Folds, Pete Yorn. I heard Paramore for a more recent one. I have not heard that one yet, and don't really care to, but that's cool that younger bands are doing it. And so it makes sense that Face to Face is a more punky version of this. I went back and listened to that one. I'll put a link on the Facebook page as well. It's they kept it pretty true to the fashion there, just kind of more punked up in that kind of punkier vocals, and the guitars are a little nastier. The keyboard riffs are all done with more of a distortion guitar and stuff. So it's just funny how a single or a cover song can really open up a whole new world to people as far as becoming a fan. I've had countless bands where I've discovered them based on a cover from somebody else. So cool deal. Thanks so much, Jules and Ben. Definitely let us know if you somehow are able to unearth that clip that your old high school friends made of recreating the Inbetween Days video. And here's a quick one from Linda that, being a Cure podcast episode where we talk about specific songs, we got to address deciphering the lyrics. What do they mean? And she has a cool theory on this one. It says, "Hey Gavin, I heard or read somewhere that Inbetween Days is a song about Simon. It kind of makes sense if you think about how this is written around the time when Robert and Simon had a falling out. I think it is potentially a song about his life and her in between, maybe Mary, and that when Simon, the without you part, left, he felt empty, as if it wasn't as fulfilling or fun without his mate along for the ride in the band with him. Maybe not, but otherwise it's kind of just a weird song about a love triangle, maybe. So just a few thoughts. Thanks." Thank you, Linda. And I hadn't really heard or thought that perspective before, but that makes sense. As we'll address later, there is some Simon related threads that could all kind of piece together here. Arusha and her friends that we're going to listen to in a second start talking, and later in that segment they bring up a good point about Simon, and then I also got another theory from him that I'll recap with. So we'll come back to this, but I kind of like that idea that it's probably a well-disguised Cure lyrics, one of Robert's, the way he will probably tap into something like that and then just kind of doctor it up like a love song, but could be a good love song of missing your friend if you think of it from that perspective, and indeed. So I'm on board with that. Why not? So speaking of which, we got Arusha coming up next with her buddies Ben and Autumn up in New York, and they're going to discuss the 12-inch in its entirety. Let's kick it off to them.
This is Arusha from Push, a Cure fan documentary. Oh, I forgot to fucking get my name from the Hollywood Squares.
Oh, I'm gonna do that now before you
Charles Nelson Riley, that's it!
Is it Charles Nelson Riley?
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah,
Can I be
yeah.
Phil Stiller?
Yeah, you can be Phyllis Diller.
What are you gonna be? Let's find you a Hollywood...
I haven't seen Hollywood Squares
let's quickly
in so
find you a
long.
Hollywood Square.
I was probably 2 feet tall the last time I saw that shit.
Oh, I was probably...
Does anybody recognize that voice? It's Ben from Black Metal and
It's actually him, yeah.
Yeah.
It hurt my
I'm
voice
coughing
when I
on
was
your
doing
behalf.
that.
I didn't even make the noise.
No, so I'm hanging out with my friends and neighbors, Autumn Zing.
Hello.
A creative human who helped me design. Well, I directed it, and she actually drew the stickers that have been put out for Push, a Cure fan documentary. So she's going to do my animation in the film once I get my $1 million donation.
Even before.
Yeah.
I'll do some drawings.
Right. And on our downtime.
Yeah.
But she also puts out her own stuff.
I do. I have a one-woman band called Lacey Spacecake, and I'm also in another band called Bat Fancy, and I put out 2 books, Comfort Eating with Nick Cave and Defensive Eating with Morrissey, and they're exactly as the titles would suggest. Just images of both people crying in their food, and there's vegan recipes, and it's available through Microcosm Publishing. That is my first plug I've ever done in my whole life.
That's great. Now, can we say like Microcosm Publishing?
Microcosm Publishing.
Awesome.
Yes, thank you. And Lacey Spacecake.
And where can we find Lacey
Find
Spacecake?
Lacey Spacecake on bandcamp.com.
You can also, she has a website.
autumnzing.com.
And she has one video called, oh I mean, you have a lot of great videos.
I have a lot of
but-
videos.
But the video that I really love is oh my god, is it called?
Cannibal Rats?
No, it's the Manzig Halloween.
Oh, the
Old
Manzig, old Manzig. Yeah, I
Oh my
envisioned
God.
a Halloween of an aging Danzig.
It's so good.
Animated
It's
him
so
with
good.
Scooby-Doo ghosts.
He remembers Halloween.
He remembers
Back in the
Halloween.
day, back when I
Oh.
celebrated Halloween.
What do you think Danzig thinks of the political climate right now?
I think he's worried about the cost of cat litter and his hoarding.
Oh my god, right?
I hope so.
Is he a hoarder?
No, but he's a cat dad, as he should be. You know, he's got that extra funds and he's helping our feline population.
So Ben, you have a blog.
I do. As of the time of recording, it's offline while I'm getting a new host for the website because these things happen. It's called Black Metal and Brews.
You have an Instagram account though. Too.
I do. Oh, I have an Instagram. I have a YouTube channel. I have a Patreon. I have all of the dang things. A Twitter
Patreon?
account.
I was telling you to do that.
It's
Shit.
Shoot, girl.
yeah. No, beer and metal are not cheap hobbies.
Really?
So what I need from you is to give me beer money.
Why don't you have a corpse
No.
around the house?
You know, this. I'll set a reward level on my crowdfunding when you give me $150.
So I have to pay for the corpse paint.
No.
You know,
He'll just come to your house wearing that.
We should
No.
add that to our building.
No, but,
the corpse paint.
Yeah. So I've been running a website for 4.5 years. I hope to share extreme art with people in a way that they wouldn't get it otherwise, instead of acknowledging shit as this is fucking sick like 99% of people that listen to heavy metal do. I try to give you an actual context. You know, this is why this is good. This is how it makes me feel. You know, things that you would hopefully find elsewhere. Yeah, it was like
Did you know his mom saw The Cure in like the top tour?
she saw him. I'll fucking ask her. It's past her bedtime, even in the West Coast. But
She's been in like London.
well,
and
she
shit.
saw them in like London in 1980. I want to say,
Yeah.
or so she said. She went to, I think it was 1980. But she went there, and she fell in love with The Cure before they had made it over here, and came back and like was like, oh my god, you guys, and like.
But we're talking about Head on the Door.
Yeah, so Head on the Door. In Between Days.
So I brought up the 12-inch to Inbetween Days, the single with the Exploding Boy, and a few hours after this. It is hands down one of my favorite singles by The Cure, and the two B-sides are fucking phenomenal. Everything about this record to me is phenomenal. I mean, we tried to do this recording last night and there was a big fail, but anyway, we talked about it, like the artwork in this, the font on the record.
And the music, all of it.
I don't know, I think that something that we talked about last night that I think is interesting is the whole B-side thing, which Ben you can get into a little bit, but like, so I was saying how in the beginning when I discovered The Cure, Head on the Door was a really, really big thing for me because I probably discovered the singles, the Standing on a Beach, and I can't remember if I saw them before. I must have seen them after I started getting super crazy, but it was somewhere around that time in 1986. But then I got to Head on the Door, and I was just like, wow, that record was like a breakthrough record for me because of the album, but the videos were phenomenal, but the B-sides were so fucking good. And I told a little story about when I was in high school.
Tell it again.
Well, I think this has to do with like this weird, it's not only like being an outsider in school, but it's like this resistance from people for just being, I mean, I always thought there was like a weird thing, like why is anyone angry that I like The Cure?
Isn't
like,
it crazy to think that was like actually a time in history? Like I'm sure that doesn't happen now, but when we were growing up, like yeah, people could not handle that. Like that was like a reason to beat the shit out of me, was to like listen to The Cure. Which
yeah,
is so
tell me more about
stupid.
that real quick.
Well, lines were drawn. Like, I feel like, I grew up in Des Moines, Iowa, and it was, you know, I went to public school in the 80s and some of the 90s.
Enough said.
Yeah. I mean, that's all that really has to be said. But, like, It wasn't. There was no Tumblr. There was no like you can just go to a fucking like Walgreens and get your colored hair dye. Like you couldn't do any of it. You had to do it yourself. And there were very few people like us, especially in the Midwest. So it's like I would go to school and people were like, "What the fuck? Like what are you even? Like you die Satan worshipping whatever the cure for you? Like like." They weren't that clever.
Fucking faggot dyke.
Yeah, it was more like fucking faggot, dyke, witch,
God.
ass, fucking fat witch, dyke,
This big
cure,
fat guy with big hair.
fucking cure, fucking suck, fucking. Yeah, it was just like a lot of that. But yeah, it was cool to listen to Metallica. I actually don't get the politics involved. But yeah, like you would get shit for listening to these bands, and it was kind of like astonishing to me because I remember summer vacation happened and everybody had hated me last time I checked. And then I went to school again for senior year. I think it was either senior year or junior year. And Nirvana broke. And suddenly I was cool. Suddenly it was like Kurt Cobain, I guess, told a whole nation
Just
of
like
assholes
water.
that like, oh, that weirdo, yeah, you're on their team now. And so all these fucking like assholes suddenly wanted to know about The Cure, wanted to know about all these bands that Kurt Cobain talked about. I'm not sure if he talked about The Cure, but just the bands that were weird enough that started Nirvana. And this pissed me off. And I've always had a problem with Nirvana because of that.
Huh.
So he's been like, fuck Nirvana. Like, really? Oh, Kurt Cobain's cooler than me? No, he's not. No,
Right.
sorry.
Right.
Anyway, yeah, you had to defend your rights to listen to The Cure. It's kind of crazy. Now kids have it very easy. You only get bullied for...
Ben's giving up.
Yeah, no.
What?
No, I'm not disagreeing at all. I just think kids listen to stuff that's so much more out there now, and not necessarily in a good way.
Well, no, because they have
Like,
Tumblr. They
well,
can
right,
just,
they've
like,
got that. What is it?
one-on-one, like fucking.
Oh God, what was the one? 'Cause
Looks like you're choosing
I remember I walked
It's true,
through
though.
a crowd in front of the
I
show.
saw a million years
It
old.
was called Blood on the Dance Floor or something.
Yeah, I know that.
Yeah.
band, yeah.
I know that. Oh yeah, I know
You
the
know,
drummer. I mean, he was my friend.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, a friend of yours, huh? No, they're.
That's how fucking cool we are.
They don't
No.
even have drums
No.
in the band.
I don't know. I know it looks like Candy Raver Juggalo aesthetic. You know.
Cool. You
I
had
mean,
me
the
at-
Juggalos are gonna march on DC,
You
so
had me at Candy. But the
realistically-
Candy Waver's gonna
What-
march.
Ooh.
I think they're too busy in their chill out, come down room.
but no, I mean, it's just like I think it gets kind of lost in history. I don't want to make this like podcast political or anything, but like Generation X, like we gotta take a lot of like fucking punches for
Yeah, definitely.
people to just like really look and do whatever the hell they want right now. It's like it wasn't that cool when we were.
No, it wasn't cool at all. I mean, and that's what like with the Cure. Like however I discovered them. Like I think I've said before, I heard them at a party, and then I saw them on MTV, and blah blah blah. Night Flight probably on the telly.
It was Night Flight.
Yeah, Night Flight definitely. So I go to school, and I had given the Head on the Door tape to this popular guy, and he just happened to return it. Like it was just like such a movie moment. This is like one of the movies I wish I could make about, it would be a narrative story, not a documentary, of course. But it's like the bell rings, everybody's like shuffling to class, and this guy like starts talking to me in the door frame. If the camera's facing the door and like the camera's at the desks and there's like the teacher's desk here, he's talking to me and he's like, "Thanks so much, Arusha. This is such a great tape. I love The Cure. Thanks." I'm like, "Oh, you're welcome." And so then insert teacher's hand, and he's like, "What's this?" And this guy looks like a cross between Weird Al Yankovic and like Howard Stern with the greasy hair and the fucking long ass nose and the weird glasses. And he's like, "What is it?" And I'm like, and then trying to like skirt out of it, like, want to go to my seat, take your stupid math class. And he's like,
2 + 2 = fuck you.
yeah. And he's like, "Oh, and he's like, what's The Cure?" And I was like, "Well, it's just a band and they're really good." And he's like, "What's so good about them?" "Hey, everybody, Arusha's got a band to tell you about." And he like announced it in front of the class. Of course, everyone's laughing. And so I tell him that the lyrics are really good. And he opens, I just never forget this, he opens up the fucking tape, the liner, and he reads the lyrics to Inbetween Days in like this deadpan voice. He goes, Yesterday, I got so old, I felt like I could die. Yesterday, I got so old, it made me want to cry.
So good.
And I mean, I'm like, fuck you. It's enough that I have to deal with these fucking kids my age.
Yeah.
And I got teachers up my ass.
You got everyone on your ass today.
so good.
And we're going to get Howard Stern to play the part. I'm going to send him a message. Howard, what are you doing, Mr. Stern?
If he's too expensive, I can probably get
Put
my
on the
hair there.
curly wig.
I've got the nose already. You know? When I started in radio, I remember there was a guy who would always ride the same bus with me when I was doing my internship at a radio station, like when I was like 16. And he, you know, because I had long, fucked up, frizzy hair, he'd be like, "You're gonna be the next Howard Stern, aren't you?" You know, and he was trying to be supportive, and I'm like, that guy's kind of a dick.
That Howard Stern's
No,
bad.
and I get that now.
Yeah.
But at the time, I'm just like, I don't know. Like I saw his show once, like the TV show, and he was just trying to talk like with a midget and a stripper, and I'm like, I don't understand.
That's why
this.
he's rad.
Right.
I'm like, are you a piece of shit, or are you onto something I don't get?
He's
And it was
cool,
that
right?
he was
I like
onto
Howard
something
Stern.
I didn't get.
I like Howard Stern. He's cool. Anyway,
Anyway,
we're making that video.
Yeah, right.
making that video.
Storyboarding that this week.
But storyboarding it. Oh my god. Waterboarding it. It's
Oh, that's funny because it's sad.
yeah, it's
That's
terrible.
funny because it's sad.
But so in between days, so B-sides, right? So I always thought, well, wouldn't it be great if The Cure did a tour called B-Side by the Seaside? I just always thought it'd be cool, and I was like, you know, when I meet Robert Smith, I'm gonna give him that idea, and he's gonna love it.
Arusha raffle, Riff Randall.
Yep, he's gonna love it.
Rock and Roll High School starring The Cure and Arusha.
And so this year, you know, I met The Cure, I'm making this film, I'm doing all this crap, and this year, third concert into a 20 concert run for me or something. I'm with Jeff Schumann, who Autumn knows, who...
Hi, Jeff Schumann, that I know
Hi, Jeff Schumann, that I
from
don't
Tower
know.
Records.
Yeah, they work together at Tower. But, so we're in the third show, and the first two shows are amazing, and we're, you know, placing bets on what they're going to play on night 3, and Jeff earlier in the day had said Exploding Boy, and I was like, ha ha, that's funny. And then during the fucking show, during like the third encore, we were, you know, debating, like there was silence coming, and we didn't know what the song was. And Jeff said it again, and I'm like, shut up, it's not going to be the...
I feel like he had like an insider.
No, he didn't.
Okay.
Jeff, did you have an inside...
Yeah, tell us. Jeff, I don't trust you.
Jeff,
I don't
we need
trust
to
you.
know.
You had an insider. You just felt it.
He just felt it. But he's actually really good at vibing things. But needless to say, we both just turned into little fucking bitches of joy. We're like, wow! I can't believe it. I still, like, when I hear the crowd tapes of that moment, we were sitting there, and I don't remember what Robert said. And,
That's exactly what he said, actually.
yeah. And I saw the Exploding Boy played for the first time live ever.
Oh,
How'd you
wow.
feel when
Ever.
you heard that first like?
I mean, that is my favorite B-side and probably one of my favorite songs by The Cure.
Oh shit! You died.
I just couldn't. I remember Jeff and I were like, oh my god, oh my god.
Yeah.
Just that again, like it just reinstated this feeling that you can have that rush or that excitement or like full on 100% attention in the moment that people like to give to being a teenager at any point in your life. And I don't think it has to do with being a teenager so much as that when you're a teenager, you're more open to that because it happens more. You don't have as much baggage. You're not as tired physically. You're not as self-aware. So you're just more open to that. I mean, I thought it sounded great, but it was also like I was in such awe that they were playing it that it's almost like I can't remember it. It's almost like my first Cure show. Like,
Yeah.
I can't. I'm like, well, I first saw it and I was like, oh my god, I can't.
Yeah, I mean, I've only got one, so I understand that all too well.
Did you only go this?
I've only seen them once.
But was it this summer?
Yeah, it was in May. It was like the Portland, Oregon show, but it's like 30 miles north of Portland in Washington.
Oh, so before they came to New York.
Yeah,
Okay.
It was like maybe 2 weeks before.
Yeah.
How was it?
Yeah. I mean, that's the thing. Like, I know what happened. I mean, I was, I remember most of the songs they played. I remember how it felt, but I don't remember the quality of any of it. I just know that it was overwhelming. I knew a few of the songs they would play, which apparently aren't always in the set, but I was just like, they have to, because I've waited, pretty much 30 fucking years to see this, and they're gonna play this because I need them to. I was like, they have to play From the Edge of the Deep Green Sea. They have to.
Mm-hmm.
And they did. And I guess that was pretty heavily featured on the tour in general. But I hadn't been looking at the set list, so I didn't know. It was just like, the waterworks the second they took the stage and shit.
Yeah.
They didn't play Exploding Boy though, which is one of my favorite songs of all time. Since I was a little kid.
What is it like let's get into a little bit of the technical shit. Like, what is it? I mean, there's a few hours after this, but let's talk about the Exploding Boy, because
it's hard to put something like that on a technical level. Like, so that song, just for some reason, you've got the saxophone cutting through, or the keyboard approximation of a saxophone. I can't even tell. The guitars that are acoustic, but they feel so big. Like, it's got a very big sound. So especially, remembering childhood with that, it's like, oh yeah, it was just like that sort of thing that it would just fill you with joy. It's such a sad song in theory, but it's
lyrically?
hopeful sounding. Like,
are you talking about lyrics?
Yeah, lyrically, it's like, you're looking at somebody who, my interpretation at least is like looking through you basically, but as a listener, it's just like you're just yammering on at me or whatever, and I'm not even listening. I'm not paying attention to you. But like, we'll get through this or something, whatever. But it's like, it's an overall hopeful sound, and like, there's something just so euphoric about it. Like, that's the word I keep coming back to. Like, and maybe it's that saxophone paired with his vocal line.
You're talking about the...
Yeah, exactly. Like, it's very warm. It's not like everything's great, but it's like, no, like, it's cresting in some sort of way. And I think it's impossible not to be moved by that on some level. At least if it's the kind of music that speaks to you.
Did they ever do it again on that tour? I wasn't following the set list. When did they play it again?
I'm not sure. Maybe El Paso, and I saw it in LA again. But
they played it in LA.
Yeah.
Motherfuckers.
Yeah.
They waited till I moved out of LA, and they're like, you know what we're gonna do?
Yeah.
We're gonna play fuck you out.
Yeah.
How's New York? Here's the set list.
They're mad that you're not.
A million times.
You got to see him 3 times, though.
I've seen them more than 3 times.
Yeah.
But I've never seen The Exploding Boy, and if I still lived in LA, I would have seen that. But they were like, that was just Robert Smith being like, yep, fuck her.
No.
New York. Oh, you're too good for Los Angeles?
The only B-side I'm glad we got one at all. No complaints. But they dug out This Twilight Garden at the show I was at. Which was fucking cool.
Yeah,
I think they played it like 6 shows on the tour or something.
So that was your first Cure show, right?
It was the first time I ever saw The Cure. It was just before my 29th birthday, and I'd been waiting my entire life to see them.
I'm shocked your mom, like, when you were like a baby, didn't bring you to a show or something.
No, she had babysitters.
Oh, motherfucker! Really?
Yeah.
That's like an anecdote I did not know. So you were at home with a babysitter while your mom was seeing The Cure?
Yeah, I mean, I was like 2.
Oh, she should have brought
I know, and I would have. And the
come
kicker is,
on.
at 2,
Sure.
I knew and enjoyed their
Contrary.
music. Like, that was already part of me. That was part of my
DNA.
life. 2 weeks, I think, to the day before I was born, Kiss Me came out. Like, that shit's in my blood.
Man, you just aged me.
I mean, bands don't make B-sides anymore, and I think it's interesting that a lot of bands that did have B-sides, it would be like, oh, here's an alternate take of the single that you're buying, or here's a live track or something. But The Cure would actually have non-album cuts or things that were just as good, sometimes better than the single they were
Usually better.
on. I mean, in my opinion, usually
Yeah.
better, but I realize that's
controversial.
it's an opinion, not a fact. It's an alternative fact.
Yeah. Because we're talking about alternative music.
And it was. I remember reading and Join the Dots because I bought it. I think 3 or 4 days after it came out because I was so excited. In the little book that comes with it, it talked about Robert as a kid buying a single, and he would always play the B-side first because, he either already knew the single or he really wanted to know what the band's ideas were that they were afraid, or not afraid, but, that they thought might be a little more to push on their listener, and he wanted to be engaged in that fashion. And so, similarly, I guess, I don't know if it's because of that, the Cure's B-sides, though, I've always felt like a kind of more adventurous version of some of the stuff they'd put out for the radio. I mean, aside from stuff on this, I mean, you hear so many songs. There's like "Splintered in Her Head" or "New Day" or something like
New Day
those. Oh, that's my favorite. I know they've never played that live. I remember going to a.
They played that live when they went in that the Reflection store.
Oh, what New Day? I don't think they ever have.
I think they have.
But I remember like when I saw the Chameleons, the DJ was playing it before the Chameleons took the stage, and I was losing my shit just even hearing like
the record in the world.
Well, yeah, because I'm like, that's a weird fucking song to pick.
It's funny too.
It's
like
dark.
It's funny too because like as you're talking about like the Cure's B-sides and whatnot, I'm just thinking like the Cure's A-sides sound like the B-sides to bands. You know what I mean? Like they already felt like the B-side.
Right.
Yeah.
As they are. And so their B-sides are even better and weirder.
Well, right.
You can imagine.
Even for a band with popular success, they're unconventional.
Autumn, can you tell the listeners out there a little bit about the mechanics of the song?
I think it's a very odd song. I love it. It's short and sweet. It lacks the melodrama, I think, of a lot of Cure songs. They can they like get very melodramatic. I think The Exploding Boy is just kind of like a perfect song because it is so concise and it's weird. It has like all those like typical Cure ingredients that I think the album Head on the Door kind of nailed. Honestly, like it was just like weird enough. It was like I love the top two, but like it was just like it kind of mastered that in this more palatable pop. Savvy way. But yeah, it's weird. The Exploding Boy just kind of feels like a perfect song. I just think his timing on that, the lyrics, the weird instrumentation, the guitar as it comes in, it's, I don't know, it's just very satisfying. But it's also kind of melancholy. Yeah, you listen to it, and you kind of are longing for more in a weird sort of way.
It's funny because I don't associate any bit of melancholy with the song at all.
Oh, I love that. I love how human beings interpret things so differently. That's amazing.
Because to me, like, the thing that stands out about the song is it's really the music. Like, I was singing, I couldn't hear a word you say, I couldn't hear it all. You talked until your tongue fell out, and then you talked some more. Yeah. And to me, when I hear that, I'm like, yeah, like, all these fucking ding-dongs who'd, like, just talk and talk and talk and don't ever shut up.
Chatty boombalatti.
And the song is, like, has an anthem, like, a charge to it. Like, I'm gonna march down the street and play my saxophone.
Yeah, you are.
Like,
sure.
To me, I remember another, like, important point in my life was when I used to DJ at a rock and roll club in, this recorder's being so weird. I used to DJ at a rock and roll club called Death Rock Booty Call.
I love that.
Yeah, it was so fun.
It's fun. It's good music.
It was we did this, like, Sunday nights at a gay bar called The Stud. And
is The Stud still around?
I think so.
I love The Stud.
I hope so. Got it. Actually, I don't know.
Yeah, no, Lexington closed down.
San Francisco.
I mean, yeah.
Yeah, so this was in 2000, and my friend Shane, somebody I had met, was like, let's start this, like, punk rock club, and he was very funny because he was, like, very much, like, into, like, we can only play punk rock stuff, and, like, he would get mad at me for playing the Go-Go's until he realized that What's Her Nuts was, like, basically playing with the germs.
Yeah, totally.
But he and I loved The Exploding Boy, so we did this experiment where we play it, and the first Sunday, nobody danced to it. And the second Sunday, like, 5 people danced to it. And then, like, 3 months in, it was, like, the night's anthem.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
You had to get people, like, to accept it before they would take it
also,
on.
They hadn't heard it before?
Punk.
Well, I mean, I think there were a lot of people. I think with a song like The Exploding Boy, there are people that are like Cure nerds out there in the shadows that are like, and you're like, maybe they're too nervous to come out and dance, or.
I don't know.
But it was really great because I was like, I fucking love this song and I'm gonna play it at my club.
Yeah.
And so, does this mean that you guys don't like A Few Hours After This?
I love it. I love it.
I don't like it. I love it.
Exactly. Thank you.
What do you?
Oh my god! A few hours after this. Oh, I'm not even gonna say as I said before because they don't need to know that. No, it's just the drama, the orchestra, like everything about it. Like it just feels like so impassioned and desperate. I like how desperate it sounds. Like he's just out of breath while he's singing it. Like the music is so like. Like it's so intense. Every fucking moment of that song is intense. And then it kind of ends on this dreamy note where you know everything's gonna be okay. It's just like a jolt.
I never
through your
saw
body.
you again.
Yeah.
I never saw
That's
you.
That person sucked, and he's never gonna see that motherfucker
Also,
again. That's a good note. Mic drop. Yeah, that's right. I never saw you again.
I think
Fuck
it's
you.
interesting because I think I said it before that like that moment actually I love both songs and they're both really really strong, powerful songs. Like they're exploding songs. They're you know resilient, like declarative, like marching. Like I was saying, like march down the street with your flag.
Yeah.
But A Few Hours After This, I actually don't love it, and for some reason until that very end, he says, "I never saw you again."
Because you're doomed.
I never saw you again.
And he screams it.
I never saw you again.
I never saw you again.
But it's also like the way that like he pauses in it, you know, backed with the music. Whereas like the Exploding Boy, I feel like the music is what fucking kills me. It's so good, and I don't see it as like a sad song at all because the lyrics mean something to me, but it's really the music that just, I mean, the vibrancy of the guitar. The weird, what did we say it was? The sax.
Yeah, the bizarre.
I mean, it's no Baker Street.
Longer, but A Few Hours After This is a song that feels like it could be a 5 or 6 minute song, and it's totally not.
No, thank God, because you can't hear that part.
Well, right, no,
You'd be
but that's the
like-
thing. It still feels endlessly longer than it is, and I think that's clever songwriting. It's the length of a punk song, and honestly, even the structure of one, it just is arranged so differently.
I'm reading the lyrics to Exploding Boy right now.
That could be another one that a teacher could read deadpan and really not make it sound so great. But
it just
but
sounds
it
like
hits
on
hard.
again, off again relationships.
Yeah,
to me. I mean,
that's
it's just
how I always
it's like
read
a
it.
toxic relationship.
To me, you know what it reminds me of? It reminds me of Small Man, Big Mouth by Minor Threat. Like, it's more when I hear it, I think of, like, just people who just talk and don't shut the fuck up.
There's just a lot of people like that. No, it's true, man. We talk about this often.
Yeah, we do.
Because we're those people. We never shut the fuck up.
Right.
Goddamn people, they never shut the fuck up.
Okay.
Doesn't that song, when I'm thinking about the Exploding Boy, I feel like it sounds like when you unpop a bottle of champagne. Like, there's that pop, and then you just enjoy the champagne.
Yeah.
Because it'll go bad after 2.5 minutes.
Well, like,
You gotta drink it.
it's interesting because the first time we tried recording this, I said it about, Inbetween Days, but it's true about the Exploding Boy too. There's almost that drum intro that sounds like it's punching through something that's already been happening.
Yeah.
Like it sounds,
Yeah.
it's because it's not like your average like
Boris.
fill and break.
Boris.
It's staccato. It doesn't follow anything logical because it's expressive rather than musical, and that's really important. That the Cure could be musical, but also have those moments, those elements that punched through. And I think you can't possibly ignore that drum break. I mean, the guitar and sax lead in wonderfully, but when the drums kick in that you're like, oh, I'm paying attention.
But I think that like this, like when you're talking about the rhythm of like Exploding Boy, I mean Inbetween Days, like this whole album, the drumming, it's like so odd, and what's Boris doing now?
It's also interesting. I just thought of it when you're talking about the rhythm section.
Yeah.
Both the singles are songs like, I think for me, and maybe it's also because I play bass and identify with it, these are two songs that aren't really bass driven, and I think of The Cure as a bass driven band.
Simon's bass and Robert's guitar.
Like the interplay between Simon and Robert is so vital, yet neither of these songs is bass driven. Like it's acoustic guitar pretty much is the driving force in The Exploding Boy, and a few hours after this is all synthesizer.
Yeah.
And yet they both, still sound so vital and are some of the best material, which that's interesting. That's neither good nor bad, but like...
Yeah, no.
I think it's interesting. I never thought of that until this moment, but like when I think of The Cure, I always think of the bass lines to a song before any other aspect.
I think of Robert Smith's guitar. I think he's a very underrated guitar player.
We
talked about because it's like you get
that.
distracted by his voice because it's like he's the front man, he's the one that sings the words, and he has a very interesting, unique voice. But I even know like the way I play guitar is very influenced by Robert Smith. Like his guitar parts are just so perfect. I feel like he's the perfect guitarist on so many levels, and Simon's the perfect bassist. Like both of those two people together, like obviously you're gonna have The Cure, but I am really fascinated by like adding other members all the time because it does change the sound.
Yeah.
You know, you only are your ideas are very limited if you have a limited drummer, but if you have a drummer that can do anything, you can fucking do anything you want, and that's like fascinating. Like you can tell with their weirder albums.
Well, I think that's something that what you're talking about really relates is not the right word, but it has to do with Head on the Door, because Head on the Door came after The Top, which came after Japanese Whispers, which came after Faith Pornography, 17 Seconds, which came... So there were a lot of changes, and basically there was like a little bit of a rise of the 3-piece, and then a little 4-piece, and then, like a dip, and then a little...
The Top Robert Smith solo.
Right. So
a little cocaine dip.
But what I'm saying is that there was this sort of like point where The Cure almost like really could have broken up, and then this album came. Like Simon got back in the band.
They need Simon. I feel like they just. Even though I love every Cure album.
Oh yeah. So this album was very lively, vibrant, up record, but it was up in the way that like only bands. I feel like The Cure is like the best at it, but they're so good at like writing pop songs with dreary lyrics.
Oh my god, they're amazing! Like I was actually looking at the lyrics to a few hours after this, like the Mad I Am. But there's this line I think is really great. Like a lot of Robert's lyrics can sound obvious because I think he is going more for a rhythm with the music. He's using his lyrics and his voice as another instrument. I think when I was younger I thought he was very deep, and now that I write songs I realize, oh, you're just doing it as an instrument and this rhythm goes with this part, and sometimes he has like a deeper meaning what he's saying. But there's this line in the song about, I really should have known by the cut of your smile. I think that's just such a great line.
That's like the one that paired with the completion of it.
Yeah, that just like sums up the whole.
I never
song.
saw you again.
That line. I really should have known by the cut of your smile. The answer would be simple. It still took you a while to get it out of me.
Yeah.
I thought you'd do it easily.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, but like
and he doesn't say like 2 white chicks. He says checks. So in case you thought it was like 2 white chicks.
Oh yeah, I was worried about that.
Yeah. No, it's like 2 white checks, like opposite poles. So yeah, no, in case you're worried that
I think I made Arusha's lyrics at that point. 2 white trips.
Totally.
2 white.
I always heard 2 white chicks. Like what?
Checks like
2 white chicks.
He says checks, but I always hear chicks.
But it's checks like a
checks and balances.
Okay.
Yeah, like 2 white checks. Not like Czechoslovakians. Maybe it is Czechoslovakians. Like 2 white checks.
He's got a lot to say about.
He can lose himself in Chinese art, American girls.
Whoa.
It might be 2 white chicks. I don't know.
Whoa.
So that's chicks. Robert Smith on the next Holy Hour podcast. Stay tuned.
Hi, Robert.
I never saw you again.
He'll never see me to begin with after this.
All right, thanks so much, Arusha, Ben, and Autumn. so many times I wanted to pop in and I wish I could have been a part of this conversation. So yeah, just to touch on a few of the things you said real quick, I can't help myself. But yeah, going back to well, I guess I'll start with the lyrics there. A few hours after this, I totally thought that it was White Chicks too, knowing that it no way it could have been, but it does sound like that. And I always got like the second line all jumbled up too. It's the look before you go is the look for you. You only have to look and it'll all come true. I used to always think it was something like Waka Waka all come true. I knew it wasn't Waka Waka like Fozzie Bear, but it fits pretty well. But yeah, along those lines, I didn't clear it up until I got that little white lyric book, you guys. If you don't have that, should look on Amazon. There's like a lyrics from like the start till about disintegration. I think it goes all the way up to disintegration. And you can get it used for like $12 on Amazon or somewhere. And it's cool. It's like all their lyrics, all their B-sides. So for those albums that don't have the lyrics listed on the inside, it's perfect. So many good lyrics in a few hours after this. The fizzy night, that's always a weird one until you really look at the words. I always thought it was busy night, but it was a fizzy night. Probably my most widely covered Cure song that I like to play live is an acoustic one because you can change it up a bit more. But then I had this theory, even going back to Linda's email that we read earlier about Inbetween Days being about Simon and how important these three songs were in Head on the Door because it brings Simon back in. It's the first time he's playing with Porl, and Boris is the first time on this album. It's a completely new band, and the excitement level. But Ben had mentioned how the two B-sides weren't as bass-driven as other Cure songs and the single Inbetween Days in particular. And that kind of dawned on me. We keep going back to this idea of like, how could Exploding Boy and a few hours after this have been left off the album? I even wonder if on a subconscious level, if nothing else, if just the fact that having Simon back in the band, Robert knew that maybe they weren't songs that Simon really was as prominent on. So that might have been a factor in like forcing them to be B-sides. Because, it's clearly, like Chaz even said, the album's pretty short. You could have at least put Exploding Boy on there, and it would not have thrown off the length of the album or the dynamic of the album. But, yeah, if you think about it, all the other songs on Head on the Door are very bassy driven, at least in the sense of those signature Cure bass lines. And Exploding Boy in a few hours after this, not so much. So maybe that was had something to do with them becoming B-sides and not being on the album. Not so much that Simon was like, I want my songs. I think maybe just in a way that he wasn't as fond of those songs. And even the Exploding Boy, to a certain degree, going back to what we're saying, and no one can figure out why they don't love that song as much. They must not as much as all the fans do, because they would have played it live, before by now if they knew that it was as great as every fan thinks it is. Pretty much every fan is like crazy for this song, but there must be something, and I wonder what it is that like trips Robert up. It does kind of, when you really look at how short the lyrics are. The second verse is the same as the first and doesn't have a bridge. It does feel a little unfinished maybe, and maybe writing wise that's the hang up Robert has with it, is that he just never feels like the lyrics or something were quite as developed as he wanted it to be. But it's crazy. I can't imagine that they would hold off playing this, if for nothing else, just knowing how much the fans love it. And that must have been so cool for Arusha to see that live. Just hearing her talk about it gave me chills and tingles. And, whether you're old or not, it is, over time, less things give you tingles, especially like that, and I don't know, when I even just hear those stories and the possibility of hearing Exploding Boy live, I would definitely get tingles from head to toe, and that doesn't happen very often these days, so that's pretty amazing. Even as far as like set list, what we've discussed in the past, it's crazy. There's this caliber of songs like, yeah, Strange Day would be cool. There's a pretty good chance they'll play that at a live show, even though it's not super common. And then like Jumping Someone Else's Train or something, you'd be like, yeah, they do it. It could happen. And then it starts getting a little more like, probably won't hear that. And then there's this ones that you just adore that you know that you're never going to hear that. And Exploding Boy was in that category for so long, forever, since its existence. And they finally dug it out. So a few hours after this, maybe if they tour again, maybe they'll get the hint and play that live. Because as far as I know, I don't think they've ever played that one either live. So that would be cool. That would make me tingly for sure. Oh, and just to also reminded me of Arusha's story that led off the segment pretty much about the total prick of a teacher that just called out Inbetween Days and read the lyrics deadpan. And I kind of always had those battles too, you know. Inbetween Days, I think I've told a quick version of that story earlier episode, but you know, I brought it in as a tape to play in our 6th grade end of the year party, and that was the class where I met Donald for the first time. And we all played Inbetween Days. She just let us take turns playing our cassettes, and a little 6th grader, I said, oh, everyone will love Inbetween Days, and put it on. Everyone just was like, ugh. And like only the 70-year-old teacher like stuck when she's like, oh, it's catchy, and she's dancing around to it, and everybody else just hated me and was waiting their turn to play their tape. And yeah, I didn't win any new fans over, but maybe Mrs. Stewart, for those brief moment, was a Cure fan. And yeah, so it wasn't nearly as traumatic as Arusha's story, but along those lines and what Autumn was saying, it's crazy, those early Cure oppression stories. I had horrible days. Riding the bus was terrible for me because I'd wear my Cure shirts, and where I was from in Northern Virginia area, it was always like the skaters versus the rednecks. You know, we had these redneck guys, and they, you know, thought they were into metal, but it was all like headbands or hair bands and shit. And so I think it was more that, you know, because they didn't have any knowledge of the Cure, but they just despised me because I was a skater and I, you know, wore Cure t-shirts, and they just make fun of the Cure mercifully like that. And like, you know, the more perceptive ones would see that it was a guy wearing makeup on the t-shirt or whatever, and they'd be like, oh man, look at this fag wearing a guy with makeup on his shirt, while they're all wearing like Poison shirts. So like, they look way more like ladies than Robert Smith. Why are you trying to pick fights with me? Your bands are doing the exact same thing. And for so long, I hated anything heavy metal related. Still not a very big metal fan because of that, because it was always these guys trying to kick my ass wearing Metallica shirts and stuff. And I love the full circle irony of Simon on this tour wearing an Iron Maiden t-shirt now. I was just like, what the fuck? Along those lines, too, I saw Metallica did some soundtrack for a skate film that Caballero was putting together. So I'm just like, what the fuck? We should not have been battling, guys. There's enough room for all of us. I remember one day, just to totally wrap up, too, they grabbed my headphones off me. I'm like, what are you listening to? And I was like, it's The Cure. And it was Killing an Arab. And all they did was hit the first few notes. I was like, do 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 do. They went, whoa! They all just start like fucking laughing at me, going like, you're listening to music sounds like a little Arab music, little tinky guitars. And I was like, it's not the point. You're missing the point. Fuck you. Give me my Walkman back, you know, kind of thing. But so the battle's waged on, and yeah, I don't know. I'm glad that era's gone. The kids don't know how good they got it, but at the same time, we went through some Cure battles. But on a more positive note, I do want to just wrap up by thanking all these wonderful Cure fans and listeners. Chaz, always great to hear from you. Juliana and Linda, Tyler, and of course Arusha and Ben and Autumn. So good to hear from Autumn again. And welcome, Ben. And so many cool things. Once again, be sure to check out Arusha's upcoming project, Cure Fan Documentary, at curefandocumentary.com. The film's called Push. Check it out. Subscribe to all the social media. And check out Autumn Zing's projects at Lacey Spacecake and Bat Fancy. And her books, Defensive Eating with Morrissey and Comfort Eating with Nick Cave. You can also find those at mixedupgifts.com, who we always love to get a shout out to. All kinds of cool Cure stuff over there and just fun music related gifts for friends and family. So go on over there or find it at Microcosm Publishing. Ben, check out all his variations of his blog, Black Metal and Brews, where you can get up to date on that. We'll post links to all these on our Facebook page, so go on over to Facebook and find the Holy Hour Podcast. Thanks so much to those guys. Sure to subscribe on iTunes and Instagram. You can find updates on new episodes and shout outs for upcoming episodes if you want to contribute like all these awesome people did. So thank you so much. Be sure to tune in. We got some great stuff just around the bend, so just turn this thing off now and go listen to Inbetween Days, Exploding Boy, and a few hours after this, all in a row. Otherwise, talk hard.